There's no question we're back in an active weather pattern once again. A couple of indicators here. Extensive clouds in the northern plains and Great Lakes. That tends to be associated with high pressure to the north, ridging coming into the northern plains, and southwesterly upper level flow. Also, this comet cloud shape across the southern Rockies, that's an indicator of an upper level system moving through that area. And in the southern states, tropical air making its way northward. We've got convection breaking out in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi. That's ahead of a warm front, which is a little bit further to the south, and we'll sum that up on the surface analysis. There's how it looks this afternoon, 1040 millibar high, moving out of the Canadian prairies into the Dakotas, and with it, some very cold temperatures below zero in North Dakota, and the zero line all the way through Rapid City into central Wyoming, and looks like back into western Montana. Some of that cold air spilling out over the Great Basin region, northeasterly flow, snow. That's a good indicator right there. And then down in the southern U.S., very warm temperatures, 80s showing up, and I'm going to show you even 90s down there in southwest Texas. I'll get to that in just a minute, but there is the convection out ahead of the warm front, and even some fog, which is another classic indicator of the approach of a warm front. In between, there could be a dry line. I didn't see any firm indications, but I would probably be looking in this area right here. So that would divide the tropical 60s dew points from the 30s, 20s, and teens further to the west. There it is on the surface chart at this hour. 85 at Austin, 85 at San Antonio, and 95 at Del Rio. And winds across much of Texas, quite gusty. Looking at 45 knot gusts, probably some blowing dust in the panhandles. Not getting any winds from Amarillo there, but all around it, gusts up to 35 to 40. Checking out the rest of the country, let's head out to the Pacific and up to Alaska. Yep, a lot of weathercasts forget that Alaska exists, but they do have an effect on our weather when we get into these northwesterly flow patterns. Looks like an atmospheric river coming into the southern part of the state, rain, and even some mixed phase precipitation as far north as Nome. Further to the north, quite a bit of Arctic air still in place, extending into the Northwest Territories and across much of Canada. You can see a huge area, even during these afternoon hours, below zero, all the way from northern British Columbia down into the U.S. and back into Quebec. Quick look out in the Atlantic. In the North American region, it is quiet. One deep low in the Labrador Sea, but up in Iceland, they've got a very deep system affecting that area. Heavy snow, heavy rain across the island. There's the Icelandic Weather Service red alert for Reykjavik, and that's due to that strong storm they're forecasting, gusts up to about 50 to 60 miles an hour, heavy rain, snow. Quite a bit going on in that region. Let's look real quick at the temperature records. Nothing for today, even though it's warm in Texas. That does happen occasionally in early spring. Here's how things look for tomorrow. North of this line, this is going to be record lows or temperatures approaching record lows. So Rapid City expecting to break their record for the date at -11. And Seattle and Portland coming close in the mid-20s. Meanwhile, to the south, these are going to be at record highs or close to them. Looks like Greenwood, Mississippi, coming over that record of 76 set in 2007, and then approaching records at Corpus Christi, Albany, and Jackson, Kentucky. And for Wednesday, wow, have not seen a map like this in a long time. Both areas doubling down on the record temperatures. The northeastern U.S. setting many records. Seattle expected to come down to 22, Portland 21, and Medford coming down to 15. Meanwhile, in the eastern U.S., records all the way from Connecticut down to the Carolinas and Louisiana. So obviously the front is going to be in between, and it should be quite a strong front. Then for Thursday, I think I'm going to stop here. Very hot in Georgia, Florida, coming up to the mid-80s. Meanwhile, lots of cold temperatures across California, Oregon, and Idaho. Sacramento coming down to 30, so these are going to be some damaging frosts across the San Joaquin Valley and possibly down in Southern California. Maybe some isolated frost and freezes in that region as well. So let's get a look at how that plays out on the GFS prognosis. Very easy to see where that cold air is coming south. So if we redraw the fronts, they're going to be something like that. Got that separate system there. Yeah, probably hooks back into there. And the Canadian front across the Bitterroot Range down into Wyoming. And I came very close to putting a Pacific front right in this region here, because I was looking at those temperatures in New Mexico and they looked a little bit on the cool side. But as I got scrolling further back, still 70 at Phoenix, 41 at Flagstaff. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. That could just mean a very steep lapse rate. So I'm inclined to think that this is more of a transitional air mass. And if I run that sequence into tomorrow afternoon, it does look like a frontal boundary really starts organizing right here in the lower Colorado River region. And eventually that consolidates and moves over the dome of cold air into Texas, Oklahoma. That's going to be about Thursday. And you can see that results in the development of a large precipitation area that heads into the Midwest for Friday. Let's take a look at the mid-level Q vectors. These are going to be the mid-level dynamics. That's going to be one significant wave across Arizona, the Las Vegas area. That sweeps up to the northeast into Colorado for later tonight into tomorrow. Here's round two, diving down the backside of that trough. That's going to become the significant one. Look at how that goes down into the base and really takes definition by Wednesday. So the weather is going to be quite interesting in the southwestern U.S. Meanwhile, the old wave heading up into the Great Lakes area, supporting that wave, the one that's producing this weather across the Great Lakes region. When the southern wave emerges into the Rockies and southern plains, we're going to see the weather go downhill in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas later in the week. And that'll take a very similar track to wave number one. Here comes wave number three down the backside. Not quite as severe, but that will have an effect on the Great Plains. Looks like around Sunday and Monday. So we'll check that out later in the week. And by that time, it looks like maybe some ridging starting to build in. SPC, they've got a slight risk out for northwest Texas into southern Missouri, covers much of eastern Oklahoma. No watches in effect. Mesoscale discussion, that's usually the preliminary indication of a pending watch box, and they've got West Texas. Looking at a potential severe thunderstorm watch box coming up here shortly. You can see a lot of discussion here about high-based convection, so our focus is going to be heavily on straight line winds. How do we go about doing a quick mesoanalysis? Well, we always start out with a satellite, and this is suggesting we've got extensive mid and upper level clouds affecting that area. Now, my experience with early spring systems is that does tend to shut down a lot of the convection. I've had a lot of bust days with situations like this because it's kind of hard to get that solar heating down there and working on the environment. So we turn to the surface map and look for boundaries. We can see that West Texas is quite moisture starved. They're getting a little wedge of maybe some upper 40s, lower 50s dew points. That's kind of a branch of the low-level jet there, so a little bit of support for stuff there, but obviously we're not getting the rich moisture that we need for significant severe weather. And same story further out east, 50s. That's not very impressive dew point temperatures. And boundaries, that's very important for supporting significant severe weather episodes. I see there's very little convergence in the wind field. Most of the convergence is actually up north. Not really talking about this cold front, but more, this is the area where I would be looking. I see some speed convergence right here in northwestern Oklahoma. But the dry line, yeah, it's hard to find that dry line. There's really, I can see where, you've got 62-degree dew points at Greenville, 48 at Mineral Wells. That's pretty significant. So I would put kind of a marginal dry line right in here and maybe up towards Tulsa. You can see as we pan towards that area, yeah, you got 57 at Tulsa, 32 at Alva. So that pretty much does define a weakly defined dry line. So any good chance for deep convection would pretty much fall into this area here, east of I-35, and I don't really think we have the support that far east. How about the models? Here's the high-resolution rapid refresh surface dew point. So that quasi-dry line feature about right there. Now, I prefer to look at the moisture a little bit up off the surface. However, it's very hard to get those products. At Pivotal Weather, the GFS product has the upper air moisture. You can see there's this 850 millibar dew point, 925. I prefer the 925, but this is kind of coarse, and it does kind of reinforce the idea that there's deeper moisture just east of that dry line feature. However, the poor wind convergence out in that area suggests the dynamics are not really ideal today, and the area is strongly capped. Let's go back to that high-resolution rapid refresh. So I'm dropping a skew-t for Greenville, Texas, just east of DFW, just kind of sampling the tropical air, seeing what's going on. And there's that strong cap. We would need temperatures up near looks like about 85 to effectively break that cap. And looking at the map, we're just not that close. So the probabilistic hazard, marginal tornado, but I'm not really sure we're set up to get any convection. The wind shear, yeah, certainly supportive of that. And then the next thing we can do is just kind of go forward and see if any preset breaks out, and just not really seeing that east of that dry line. All of this stuff here, this is back behind that dry line. That's all going to be elevated. So unless we can shunt that moisture northward, just not really going to be any help. And just looking at these cells, they don't really look all that impressive. They're kind of grungy. Few of those on the tail end, they look interesting, maybe around the Lake Texoma area. Some of those could come together somewhat after dark. But it's not really a great setup. So let's see what the moisture advection is doing. Yeah, Look at that. It does surge northward. Okay. So things could come together. Midnight, 1 in the morning, that's not really a great time to organize significant severe weather. And it looks like continued ongoing problems with that cap. It's kind of hard to break the cap in the middle of the night, so you tend to get a lot of forced convection, elevated convection, and so on. But due to the shear profile looking pretty good, we would still need to kind of keep tabs on that, just in case something happens. So just going through the rest of the charts here, you can see that cold front rapidly moving south, that moisture surge making it into central Oklahoma, and the triple point up there near Watauga. And you can see the cold front as it moves south, shifting that triple point down towards Durant early tomorrow morning. Then it undercuts the moisture. The triple point shifts down into the Austin area later in the day. So yeah, still a little bit of a dry line down in that region. Cold front moving south. And the model really not even breaking out anything along that boundary. And sometimes I will go to the ARW. That's going to be over here. The ARW is a little bit more of a sophisticated baroclinic model. Let's see what that does. Yeah, it looks like a little bit of organization on that southeast Oklahoma stuff around midnight. So yeah, we will have to keep tabs on those, just in case. But for tomorrow, yeah, the ARW not even going for anything in central Texas. However, one area we will have to watch is in the central Mississippi River Valley for tomorrow. This is how it's going to look early tomorrow morning. MCS moving eastward from the Ozarks. And as we add that afternoon heating, the additional warm air advection, that's going to prime this area, western Tennessee, western Kentucky. But as we go forward into the afternoon hours, the ARW at least is keeping much of it linear. Now we do have a lot of concern about any cells developing out ahead of the line. However, this is a 30-hour forecast. That's not really within the domain of mesoscale models. So we're not going to really know for sure what's going to happen until we get the model runs for tomorrow morning. But this is going to be an area that we want to keep an eye on, just in case we start getting discrete cell formation, which would be cells out ahead of the line or the line breaking up into individual cells. So that will be our focus for tomorrow, maybe as far south as Alabama and Mississippi. Let's see what that area looks like tomorrow evening. Conditionally unstable lapse rate, decent shear, but I'm not really sure we have the widespread instability we need to support an organized severe weather episode. Further up north, Tennessee, you notice I'm referring to the GFS for a lot of this data. Still lacking instability. Shear is pretty good. So tomorrow will be the best time to evaluate all of this. But for the time being, there's the SPC Day 2. Paducah, all the way down to Memphis, Nashville, and northern Mississippi. Let's check in on Big Rig Steve with his great view of the sky. He is in the Salt Lake City area, just west of there, heading westbound from Denver towards San Francisco. And we're seeing a lot of high overcast. That's going to be altostratus, cirrus, kind of a mixture of the two. He's back behind that cold front. So he is up in this area right here in that region of snow showers. And cold air advection tends to be an unstable regime in the lower troposphere. So wherever we get the slightest amount of heating, some of that sun poking out over the hills, maybe some orographic lift, we get some cumulus forming up about 5,000 or 6,000 feet off the ground. And just in the past hour or two, a major dust storm in the El Paso area. That's it right there. Looks like it involves these playas in Old Mexico. Very strong winds. You can see the transverse banding in northern Mexico. Those are some good indicators of very strong winds aloft, maybe some jet streak cirrus. And when we get weather like that, you want to head straight for the METARs. You can do that at Aviation Weather Center. There it is, El Paso, reporting 2 miles in blowing dust. Winds out of 260 at 25, gusting to 41. And across the border, Juarez, winds a little bit weaker, but the dust about the same. And since we're in Texas, you can go to the Texas Department of Transportation cameras, and we can check out that dust. There it is. Yeah, it looks a little bit like Mars. And that will be our stopping point for today. I want to thank you all for joining, and especially I want to thank our Patreon supporters for helping to keep the channel going. Hope you have a great Monday evening. We'll see you back here on Wednesday. Take care. Bye-bye.